Hello, everyone. Thank you, and thanks you all for joining. I'm Dan Schaefer, Director of Partner Strategy and Enablement here at EditShare, and I am, as always, thrilled to welcome you today. This webinar is going to be recorded, and we'll make the recording available online afterwards with links sent out in the next day or two. For those of you who have been following our series, welcome back, and thank you so much for keeping the questions coming. You know that's why we do these. And to those who are joining for the first time, we're so happy that you're here, and we look forward to what you bring to the discussion. Blackbird is joining us today to explore a really innovative way to edit content rapidly from the cloud, from anywhere on any web-connected computer. Our EditShare Chief Technology Officer, Stephen Tallamy, and Blackbird's International Vice President of Commercial will highlight how our solution enables flexible, rapid editing in the cloud. We're going to discuss what makes this possible, and then we'll show you a demo of it in action. Finally, we're going to share some best practices and address the common questions that we hear from our clients and prospects. And as always, we'll wrap up with some time to answer your questions, be they common or uncommon. Please use the question and answer features like that thumbs up button to send us questions and promote others' questions so we know the ones you want us to answer the most. And I'd also like to remind you that this webinar is best viewed in side-by-side mode and in gallery view so you can see all of our panelists. Also, you can click and move the slider between our slide content and our panelists' videos to resize to your heart's content. So with that, I think Stephen is ready to kick things off. Stephen?
Great, thanks, Dan, and welcome everybody to another of our webinars, and another one, unfortunately, here in the UK under lockdown. So again, we are all sort of continuing to adapt to these changing circumstances, but I think it's a good way of, I guess, framing why we need some of these tools and why we're really investing in, these remote ways of working, these ways of accessing it, editing our content from everywhere, because everyone is still having to find ways of working in these kind of situations. And also many people are kind of preferring this kind of way of working as well, or at least some of the flexibility. So it's great to be continuing to show, new ways of working. And this is why I'm very excited to have the partnership with Blackbird, which we announced very recently, and have Ollie with us today to talk through things. So let's just give you a little bit of an overview of what EditShare and Blackbird are doing together, and then I'm going to hand over to Ollie to give us a bit of an overview of Blackbird itself. Really what we've announced is being able to bring quick turnaround web-based video editing into your video production system. So depending on what your overall workflow is, you may have all sorts of different parts in your video production system. What we're enabling here is the ability to use a web-based video editor in the form of Blackbird to allow you to access that content remotely and do quick turnaround videoing in there. What that means from a sort of perspective of what you'll see today in our demonstration is you'll see a workflow that we can enable where you can do all the things that you would normally do in our asset manager flow, organize things, tag things, manage things, get all of your content ingested, store them on our high performance storage, and then they can be handed off to Blackbird to be edited. And then as things come out of the Blackbird environment, we'll show you how you can enable things like review and approve, archive, and many other the workflows that we enable in Sound asset management and storage systems as things go through that end of the life cycle. So it's really bringing Blackbird right in the center to do your editing with EditShare enabling both the ingest, the import, and the other end of the chain. And there's also, we'll sort of discuss a little bit towards the end how this combined solution allows it to make it very easy for you to hand off something that you may have edited in Blackbird, but you want to add visual effects or do other finishing in other tools along the tool chain. And so without further ado, I think I'll just hand over to Ollie, who's going to give us a bit of an overview of what is Blackbird. If you're not familiar with Blackbird, I know some people will be coming in following EditShare and some following Blackbird. So we'll give you a little interview, sort of an intro to both of the technologies, and then we'll show the combined demo. Over to you, Ollie.
Excellent, thanks, Stephen. So yeah, I can see a few familiar names on the attendees list there, but obviously, Stephen said we think there's probably some people who aren't familiar with one or other solution. So I don't want to take a long time. We're going to get stuck into the meaty bit of actually how does the integration work and the demo. But just a very brief introduction to Blackbird for anyone who isn't familiar with us. So one thing you already know is that Blackbird is a cloud-based video editing solution. What that really means is that we enable our customers to access their content, whether that's live streams or file-based content, and that can exist in a variety of locations and infrastructures before they clip, sequence, log, perform a multitude of tasks against that including real-time multi-track nonlinear editing, and then we publish out. The critical thing for us, of course, is how we do it and the fact that it's all inside that web browser interface. And today we're going to obviously look specifically at how we're working with EditShare on that, because obviously, you know, it's the infrastructure that Blackbird sits on top on that really adds value to that workflow. So as a bit of background, Blackbird's been around for quite a while actually, and the history of the company is in the traditional broadcast post-production world. So for many years we have worked with and still work with most of the major post-production facilities you can see, such as Evolutions on the slide here, in Soho in the UK and beyond, where Blackbird has been a workflow tool in very traditional long form production processes. Now, what we've seen over the last few years is quite a transformation in the industry in general, and certainly a bit of a transformation for Blackbird itself, where large media organizations in general are moving content up to the cloud, or even if their content isn't in the cloud, they're looking at cloud workflows around that media production chain and around live production as well. So now for us, we have a wide range of workflows. You can see here at Premier League clubs, up through leagues and federations like the NHL and the NRL, lots of sports broadcasting and service providers like IMG and Delta Tray. We also do around 50 regional news stations and a whole load of other types of content out there. So we have a lot of different workflows that range from that very, very fast turnaround kind of content in live through to those traditional broadcast post-production workflows. And we're going to touch on some of those in the demo today as well. So a few things that those customers have in common are some of the reasons that they come to us. And obviously we're going to have a look at this in more detail. But cost savings is a big one, as I already just said. The fact that Blackbird adds workflow into existing infrastructure is a very important point for us. We are not duplicating infrastructure or adding a big platform on top of existing infra. Speed and agility is not just around live workflows, but obviously something that's crucial within the cloud, and Blackbird can allow you to edit on your content just a couple of seconds behind live in those workflows. Remote is more important than ever, obviously. This is something that's native to cloud in general, but one thing we've seen certainly in this year is the efficient remote workflows become even more important, and the Blackbird Editor can run on as little as 2 meg internet, which has really been transformational for some of our customers who have sent people not just into remote workflows, but obviously into home environments at short notice as well. Quality is important for us, not just the quality of the tool set, but the quality of the output, and we'll talk about that in the infrastructure a little bit more. And also video everywhere, again, about creating video for multiple endpoints, but also actually about giving access to video everywhere within an organization. So one of the key things for our customers is not just the core broadcast teams and broadcast workflows, but actually opening that up to the rest of the business and increasing the ROI on the content through that. So I'm going to hand back over to Stephen to get stuck into the architecture, but very quickly before I do, I just want to introduce the Blackbird technology really. Because this is the crucial bit at the heart of it. So if I pop to the browser here, I'm just on our website, blackbird.video, on the solution page, and you can come and have a look at this after the webinar. There's an example here of a piece of content using the Blackbird technology. Now I can play this media as you would expect, but you'll notice I can also visualize what's coming ahead of me. I can see my shot changes, the content that's coming, and I can start to move through it in a completely non-linear fashion. There's no buffering or latency, no download times, or anything like that. This includes multiple speed playbacks, reverse playback, stepping through frame by frame, including audio feedback on a frame basis. And if I zoom in here, actually, you can see every single frame of video. And so this kind of navigation is a great starting point to understand what we're doing here, because all of that is actually technically impossible with any other kind of browser-based technology. And that is completely unique to Blackbird. And it's that tech that allows us to do what we do in that browser interface and provide the kind of workflows that we're talking about today. So Stephen, back over to you. Like I said, we'll get stuck into the really interesting bit and have a look at how we're architecting this.
That's great, thanks, Ollie. And I think, you know, that technology is pretty incredible stuff. You know, when I talk to the team and talk to other people, oh no, you can't edit video in a web browser. Well, this really shows you that you can. And those are the key things that you need to be able to do in a web browser, is be able to move and shuttle about and have no latency as you're doing that. So it's really an impressive technology. So just give it a little bit of an intro to anyone who's coming from the Blackbird side, just what a refresher on what EditShare makes. We really make 2.5 things. The two main core products are the EFS file system. So this is a media-oriented file system. It scales out from small systems right the way up to multiple petabyte systems, and that is deployable on the cloud and also on premise. And we also span both of those as well for a hybrid type of workflow. We also have Flow, which is our media asset management, and this provides people with a whole series of tools for managing all the manual steps that you normally would have had to do to look after your media, to ingest it, to bring it into different formats, encoding, to tag it, to put in markers, to do review and approve cycles, to gain access to it from outside of your facility. So these are our two core products. And when I say 2.5 things, the half is really our APIs. And this is really part of one of our fundamental core values with EditShare, is that ruthlessly open approach. We want to enable the best workflows that are out there. We believe that Blackbird is the best way of editing video inside of a browser environment and for these types of environments. So we really want to enable the best of breed tools that are out there. And this is really part of our philosophy. That's the 0.5 that we have in what we make. And so let's just take a very quick look, diagrammatically, and then we'll dive into a demonstration of this, of how we have brought together Blackbird and an EditShare environment. So what you're seeing on this diagram is we have the EditShare flow system on the right-hand side. This is the place where you probably traditionally be ingesting your material. You'll be bringing in from camera cards, from live captures, and managing that into our file system, EFS. Flow also works with other file systems. So again, that ruthlessly open approach is there. With EFS, you can store all that media and you can make it available to editors using craft video editing applications, and you can also manage it within the Flow system. What we're going to demonstrate is how we use those combination of tools to decide what content is going to make its way into Blackbird. So we may have a very large amount of stuff stored on our EFS storage. There may be a portion of that we're going to be using for a particular project that we're going to be editing inside of the world of Blackbird. To do that, we have integrated with the Blackbird Edge. This gives a way in which we can mount our storage very easily and make it available to the Blackbird editing engine, which is all available in the cloud. So effectively what we're doing here is checking in the media that's going to be available into the Blackbird system. And then once things have been edited and managed in there, as Ollie mentioned, then we get the high resolution rendering happening back on that edge and stored back inside of EFS. And then it's instantly available inside of Flow for you to then use in for further finishing or for review and approve or for other types of workflows. So these are the core pieces that we're going to show you today, is that a simple workflow where we have some media that's already prepared inside of Flow. We're going to make it available into the editing engine in Blackbird and then bring it back in to the world of EFS so that you can see the finished results.
I think, Stephen, just quickly, one thing is worth making particularly clear from our side is that the Blackbird Edge function that is integrated here into the EditShare workflow is not a part of the cloud platform. So although it can run in the cloud, actually it runs wherever that media is. So when Stephen's, we're talking about checking in Blackbird, making it, checking content to Blackbird and making it accessible for editing, any access and any publishing that comes out of that is working on the same media asset in the same location as it exists for the workflow. And that's one of the critical things here, is that we're not moving source files around, we're not duplicating storage and passing stuff between each other. We're actually working on the same core storage infrastructure with the EFS right at the heart of it as well. Sorry to interrupt.
Right, yes. No, that's brilliant. Yes, thanks for that. And as I say, the rendering will happen against that high resolution, all being read directly from EFS. So we're not moving larger files all around the place just to do this. We want to enable a very simple and very rapid workflow. So let's take a look at a demonstration. So this is an EditShare system that I've got running. It's our 2020.4 release. We do also have a 21.1 release coming out in December, so look out for that. Some lots of exciting new features. We have new releases every quarter. And so I'm going to be using some of the Flow tools for this. So we have some of the storage related tools in our EditShare Connect client, but I'm going to be using mostly our Airflow tool, which is our remote web access to the content through our media asset manager. And also we're going to use a little bit of flow automation to do some of our talks. Some of our tasks. So here we have a project that I've got set up here inside of Airflow. So I'm basically deciding some content. I might have ingested a load of content, and some of it's going to be useful, and some of it maybe not so useful to this project. So it's all stored on the EFS system, and I've already picked out some content that I quite like. Here I've got some audio content, I've got some introduction content, so this is maybe like a stinger, some branding that I've got available that I've ingested, and various other things. But I want to bring some more stuff into the Blackbird environment. So let's have a look here. I've got this boxing media space. I've got some other clips in here that maybe I'd like to use. This one looks quite good, and maybe this one here as well. So I'm going to take these two clips and I'm going to bring them into my project. Okay, so now when we look back in this project, we now actually have those clips available in here. So this is like me curating some of the stuff before it ends up into a Blackbird environment. So we only have a subset of what we actually need to actually make available for someone to edit. So I might filter out stuff that's not important to me. So I've now kind of curated this, and what you may have noticed on some of this media is that we've got this checkbox down here to say that it's being checked into to Blackbird, right? So each of these different clips here, this was the ones that I dragged in here. This has now been made available to the Blackbird system. Now, how have we made that happen? Well, this is where the value of flow automation comes into play. So here is our flow automation interface. This is our new web interface that we launched in 2020.4. And this sits on top of our automation product, which is a very powerful tool that allows you to do a whole bunch of different operations that you might have had to do manually in the past. It's very easy to build complex workflows or very, very simple workflows to fit what you're doing. So in this particular case, what you'll notice is I've got something that is looking for things that are inside my Blackbird project, and then it's setting an attribute to send it over to the Blackbird. So this is a custom attribute that we've set on these assets that's telling the system, right, make this available to the Blackbird system so that Edge can then publish it into the editing environment. We can also set up more sophisticated workflows. So perhaps we might want to do something that has some if and conditionals. If it's in a particular frame rate, I might want to send it off to a transcoder to turn it into a common framework, which makes it work really great in Blackbird if you have things all in the same frame rate. So there are much more sophisticated workflows that you can build that helps you curate that content automatically so that it sits inside of the Blackbird environment very easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this over to Ollie, and I'm also going, whilst he's talking, I'm going to add a few more clips into this so we see them arriving in the Blackbird editor. So over to you, Ollie.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to share my screen again here. So I'm now logged into the Blackbird editor, again, running natively inside a web browser here. We have no toolbars, no extensions or anything like that. It's 100% native to the web browser interface. And essentially, if I pop into my folder here, I've already got the couple of files that Stephen made available to me. So the really important thing as a starting point here is that the project I'm working in, the media I have accessible to me here is a direct and easy extension of the user experience that's part of the flow workflow side of things. So as soon as Stephen has selected to make that piece of media available, it pops up in Blackbird within a couple of seconds. If these were longer pieces of content, I would see this growing into the platform as we do with live streams. And I mentioned before, if I had a live stream available, I can be editing and publishing as little as 5 seconds behind live. So we just see another piece of content that Stephen's made available to me here. Let's bring over this live one. You can see I have instant access to this media, and I can come in and start to access the frames and work on this while it's actually being processed and made available to Blackbird. So this is a relatively short form clip, but actually there's no limit to the duration of clips. I have instant access to every single frame of an unlimited amount of media with no download time and again, no latency at all. And it's worth stressing, none of this exists on my local machine. We are not moving files for the user to download. It is a completely native and immediate browser interface to access this content. So in terms of the actual users, I'm sat in a very simple UI at the moment. This is designed for non-technical teams, generally used by social and digital teams or for very fast turnaround clipping. So at the simplest level, it's very, very easy for me to find a piece of content. come in here, make a selection of a clip. I can use hotkeys or I can use my simple buttons here, drag and drop and publish. Okay, now I've dragged onto a button to publish that asset back on the existing EFS infrastructure again, so we're not publishing in the cloud, we're going back to the source to perform that. And in this scenario, I've actually used a publish button within Blackbird that automatically appends some branding onto that. So we'll have a look at that file when I hand back over to Stephen again. As you can see here, we also have options to publish directly to social media from within the platform as well. But today, obviously, we're not focusing on that. So what I could have done there is worked on a live stream, worked on some content, and within 10 seconds easily have actioned a publish directly out. Now, if I want to do something slightly more complicated, I'm going to change my layout here. In the same way, I have instant access to any piece of media within the system. Let's grab something a little bit longer form here. And instead of doing simple and short clipping, in this case, I'm going to do still pretty simple creation here, but I'm just going to generate a sequence of content. So again, I'm just dragging and shuttling through my media, instant access to any piece of this. I can visualize my shot changes if I wish to here. I can zoom in and become completely 100% frame accurate within my media here and generate a short clip. Now, everything that you do in Blackbird is rendered in real time in the actual local browser session. That's why one of the reasons why it's so responsive, but it also gives me that instant preview of the actual piece of content I'm creating here. So we're never sending back to a server for a preview or anything like that. Now, if I'm happy with the sequence, again, it's a simple drag and drop to publish that. But the view I'm working in now is also used quite a lot for collaborative workflows. So you may have multiple users working in a project within Flow. Those same users can come and collaborate on pieces of content in Blackbird as well. And often this is an editorial user or somebody on a production team who is searching, using the built-in metadata in the platform, making selections of content, building these sequences up for another user in a completely different location to then log in and finish. So if I change my view again, I can take on that role of the edit user, and now I'm working entirely within a real-time nonlinear edit timeline. So again, because Blackbird is a browser-based metadata editor, essentially, I have completely free, non-destructive edit access over my timeline here. Simple tools, so depending on where I put my cursor, as you can see, is determining whether I'm doing bi-directional or one-directional trimming. And I can also start to come in here and create some more advanced effects on my content. So I'm going to add a video transition on here. Again, it's real-time rendered within the browser itself. I can come and do independent video and audio control. I can unlock and offset my audio tracks here. This is something that's quite important, particularly often within sports editing, to offset and time commentary tracks and so on. Maybe on this cut here, I'm going to add a video and an audio transition and just start to build up a bit more of a complex edit. I can easily, again, depending on where I put my cursor, come and start to do fade ups and adjust my audio tracks here as well. Now, the simple clip I did was built for speed, so we had some automated branding on that. But in this case, I'm actually just going to bring on a little bit of branding into the timeline myself. Now, that's a black animation, so I'm actually going to just do a color fade up out of my sting into my content there. And I want to put an end board on this. I think I've got something in here that's using the logos. You can see this is, instead of a piece of media, this is actually a saved construct. So we have multiple layers that I'm starting to bring into the edit now, using transparency, positioning, and other effects to give me my end board there. Let's just make this look nice. In a similar vein, I'm going to do a color fade in to white to bring me into my end board. Okay, so I'm starting to create a little bit more complex content. We can keep going further than that. Blackbird actually supports up to 12 video tracks and 32 audio tracks. And as we've seen with the logos there, any one of these supports transparency and manipulation. So I can bring in some other video assets here. I can start to do transparency-based fades through. I can also come in and start to add effect layers as well. So every piece of media we have actually has full scale and position control. This is all keyframeable within Blackbird. I can add other effects such as blur. I can even actually come in and adjust my white balance and my black balance, hue and saturation on the content that I've got within my timeline here. and start to put some more advanced effects on. Again, all keyframeable, all reusable effects overlays, and all rendered real time within my browser environment itself. Now, audio is similar. So as you can see now, I'm operating across 4 audio tracks now. I also have full real-time pan and level control over any of my audio, so I can come and dip and raise, again, add keyframes and do some custom mixing on my audio tracks. And like any NLE, I can actually route and manage the audio tracks that I have within the timeline itself in order to determine where they're going to end up on my publish function on the other side of it. Okay, so I've created a bit more of a complex edit here. I'm not going to go through absolutely everything today, just to give you an idea of what's possible in the platform. And again, when I'm happy with this and I've finished that edit, all I'm going to do is drag and drop. I'm going to drag and drop this, and I'm going to send this to the clean render that we've got going into our EFS project here, because obviously I've put the branding on myself. And if I come over and click here, we can see that starting to process and compress and deliver itself back into the EFS system. Of course, again, that render is actually happening back within that infrastructure using that file that's on the EFS storage. And before I hand back to Stephen to have a look at the end of that workflow, just worth mentioning a couple of other things in Blackbird. Obviously, I talked about multi-track editing, audio manipulation. We can see here I have full control and availability of various metadata tracks, commentary tracks, multiple burnt-in subtitle tracks, multiple closed caption tracks that can come from and publish to metadata. We even have the ability to add voiceover directly into the timeline. So if we see here, I can and now record voiceover down straight into my web browser itself. So Blackbird really gives you a very wide range of tools that can allow you to create extremely complex sports highlights, news package editing, and a whole variety of other content, 100% real time in the browser environment. And we're going to talk a bit more about outside of the actual edit itself, the benefits that you get from that scalable browser infrastructure. So Stephen, back over to you. Hopefully you've got a couple of bits of content back in the system.
Fantastic, thanks, Ollie. And it always blows my mind whenever you hear these demos to see all of that editing functionality there, all within a browser environment, is pretty impressive. So let's just go back to show off where we got to on our workflow on the flow side of the house. So when that asset came back to EFS, within the flow system, we've got a watch folder that's monitoring a particular place where those rendered assets have been rendered by that edge server, rendered in, and then we're scanning those assets into the flow system so that we can see them, we can generate and make them available inside of our flow system. So if we go over here, we've got that space here. We've got the original material. So this was the branded edit that we had. So that was the really quick one. So you can see we've got that little branded edit just on the end of it, quick in and out, and a quick adding of that brand. And if I do a refresh, let's hope that the other content has arrived. There it is. And so this is that much more detailed edit now checked into Flow. We can have a look at it. We can go through here, and maybe I might want to make some comments on this as well. So now we can go into a review and approve style of workflow. So, you know, here we've got, I'm going to put in a little thing here. Actually, I'm not so interested in that overlay. It just doesn't work for me. So I can put that in here, then Ollie can take a look at these comments and can make any changes he wants to inside of the editing environment. So very easy for me to make these review comments. He can be accessing this tool and see exactly the same information, and we can see it's all on the timeline. So you can imagine this can open up a whole bunch of other types of workflow on the other end of things. If you want to add review and approve, or you want to kick off other things, you know, as that watch folder got new content in, we could send emails to people. We could send it through QC checking and other types of things for before it goes through to its final delivery. So a whole bunch of options there in terms of, you know, on the end of that flow. So really, hopefully you've seen the power of these two solutions together. Just to do a call out for any Q&A. I mean, we've had one in so far, and a couple of people maybe using the chat function with us. So please do get your questions and answers into that window, and vote up other people's if you really want to know an answer, so that we can use those in the Q&A section towards the end of the session. So Ollie, let's have a little chat. I'm going to take the off screen share now, and let's just have a chat about some of the things that we are hearing our customers as they sort of start to talk to us about this combined solution, and some of the values that they can get out of bringing together the worlds of EditShare and Blackbird. And so I'm going to ask a few questions here that we've heard. First one, really, when you started, you showed us that demonstration in the web browser of how you achieve this sort of magic, as it were, to actually be able to scrub through video in a web browser, which is not something you can do with a standard codec that you might use like a H.264. So you have to create some sort of codec, a proxied version of that. And we know that in the world of Flow, we have also proxy versions that are used for edit purposes or for previewing in Airflow. And so we often get asked, like, well, do we need to know about that codec inside of Flow? Does Flow need to suddenly learn all about the magic of that, or is that something that nobody needs to worry about or think about? So maybe you could give us a little bit of a picture of
sure.
When you do these kind of integrations, do we need to know about that?
Yeah, definitely. So as a start, to be clear, the Blackbird codec, as I said before, has been developed specifically over a long period of time for access and manipulation in a web browser. So this is purely to allow users in any location to be able to view media, navigate and access it in a professional way, obviously be able to edit it and real-time render those edit effects within that interface before essentially just delivering back a metadata into the original infrastructure. So Blackbird isn't it's a working environment rather than any kind of file format or delivery format that anyone would ever receive. And the other critical difference for us is that we don't create proxy files and upload them to the cloud and then download them to user machines. We're essentially creating a cache of frames in the cloud. Okay, but it's incredibly efficient, as we've seen, because we're not streaming to the user. Actually, the user's browser is fetching and caching frames completely on the fly. That it doesn't require bandwidth. We talked about, I mentioned before, minimum of maybe 2 meg bandwidth to work on this content. And as another side effect of that, there's really no storage concern, because I think, the real answer to the question, should people worry about what's happening with proxies in the background, is no. If the workflow is functioning and it's doing what you want, then there's no need to worry about that. Certainly the one thing that does get raised sometimes is, well, then am I storing 2 versions or 3 versions of my media? And the answer for us is, you're technically creating accessible caches and sections of frames to allow you to edit, but we are not, as we've mentioned, we're not moving that source. We're not creating versions and uploading and downloading them. And it's so efficient that there's no storage aspect for us. Certainly no standard storage aspect in our pricing either. So it's an understandable question, but this is a key part of what we need to do to operate in that browser environment. And the answer is no. You probably shouldn't worry about it too much.
Great, fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about sort of things like the rendering and ingest formats and deliveries like that. I mean, like, are we going to end up with something in a high quality when it comes to be rendered out? Can it go out and be used in a broadcast format? You've done all this proxy-based editing. What is what is happening there? And any tips and tricks in terms of making sure you get that highest quality result from ingest through to that sort of rendering pipeline?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so in terms of how we generate content when we output, we're pretty open and flexible, to be honest. Obviously, the key bit to that is the fact that we are always using the original source file to publish. So what that means is we can be reading whatever the in-house format is. That can be a multitude of formats. There could be different file types that Flow is managing within that workflow, and it can pick and choose what's made available to Blackbird, as we discussed. But on the output side of Blackbird, we can deliver anything from a low bitrate H.264 to a 400 meg MXF RAT piece of content, and anything in between, including multi-bitrate packages of those codecs. So that's one of the key advantages of the way we're architected, is that both the EditShare workflow and the Blackbird workflow is operating on that on that original single high quality asset, which allows us to produce anything back up to that same level of quality on the output as well.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about cloud. I mean, anyone who's familiar with these webinars know that we have talked a lot about cloud, a lot with EditShare over the last few webinars, and we tends to be a feature. It's one of our innovations this year to really drive towards cloud. But is this really, from a perspective of where my content is? Does it have to be, an EFS in the cloud system, or can an existing customer who's bought an EditShare system, an on-prem, who wants to use these things, can they use this without having to get involved in a whole, cloud infrastructure kind of play?
Yeah, well, I think you probably experience the same as us in that arena a lot, which is, people talk about cloud and public cloud providers a lot. And there's certainly a massive amount of benefit in those platforms and that infrastructure. But it's about, as far as I'm concerned, it should always be about enabling a workflow or getting value out of that. And one of the important things for us and in the integration between Blackbird and EditShare is the fact that it does not have to be cloud infrastructure in the background of that. So it can be cloud-based, or it can be very traditional on-premise storage infrastructure and workflows around either, or a hybrid of the two. And I think that's actually a very commonplace discussion here is, customers who maybe have existing storage from EditShare, they're looking at moving some of that content into the cloud, or they're looking at cloud workflows, but they're not ready to move that content into the cloud. And I think the fact that this entire workflow can operate on either or both is really critical in helping that migration.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's definitely what we're finding. We're finding a large number of our customers who've got access. They have EditShare systems, invested in those on-prem, and they've struggled maybe to get access to them. And sometimes some of those struggles are just, okay, well, how do we get that content out of the facility? The bandwidth required or shipping drives around. In this case, that's not needed. We can add that one of these edge servers next to that existing system, and then it can publish the low resolution, these codecs much more efficiently, and then everybody can access it, and they don't need high bandwidth to access it. They don't need to worry about their facility not necessarily having the highest amount of inbound bandwidth for people to be editing directly off it via VPNs or other solutions, right? They can actually unlock a whole bunch of that on-prem storage and still edit it with it in the Blackbird world.
Definitely, I think this is one of the reasons why the media industry or the video industry is in a slightly different position in some respects to do with cloud, because by definition there's a lot to do, right? Now what we both do in our products and the workflows they enable is take advantage of the browser and the scalable side of cloud for the user experience. That's obviously the key thing for Blackbird, is enabling the edit user to work in a cloud environment, but actually the storage, the source media, the publishing, the management of that assets can be anywhere. So it's about all of the benefits and none of the pain, or to whatever degree is possible.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about additional things that maybe you might not be doing inside of the Blackbird environment. So maybe some visual effects, additional finishing operations, things that maybe you're not going to use a web-based tool because it's an advanced graphics, or it's some sort of color grading or something like that. Well, how does Blackbird tend to work in that world, and how do you see the integration with the EditShare and Flow sort of benefiting that from a customer's perspective?
Absolutely. It's actually one of the most important points, I think, and it's also our top-rated question at the moment. So it's a good discussion point. The question is Blackbird a replacement for Premiere or Avid? And as you said, Stephen, what kind of functions wouldn't you do in Blackbird? So to answer both those questions, Blackbird is not a craft editor that is directly competitive with a Premiere or Avid edit environment. There's certainly a significant amount of overlap, but there is absolutely room for both of those things within the same workflow. Now, as we've seen briefly today, Blackbird is extremely powerful in terms of video and audio track management, constructing those edits, multiple track management, you know, the real-time transitions and mixing and a bit of color correction. We have effects such as blur that we can put and keyframe onto that content. So it's a very powerful editor, but there are absolutely functions you would need to go back to a real craft tool to do. And as you mentioned, really the key ones we come across there is color grading, so professional color grading. And actually, when I first started introducing Blackbird, I talked about the traditional post workflows we do. In a lot of those workflows, we are constructing that piece of content. But if you're going to grade a documentary, you're going to want to go back to an external tool to do that. And the other thing is visual effects, advanced visual effects, advanced image treatment, and so on. Now, in those workflows, we actually have the ability to output our timeline as an EDL that's understood by programs like Premiere and Avid. So it's a really important part of what we do and the tool set that we have. But one thing certainly that is important in terms of our relationship and talking about this integration today is not just us handing off a timeline, but how is that managed? How is the media in the background managed? How is that project managed? And Flow is really ties up that workflow in a significant way. So it enables Blackbird to be used with very low overhead access to content. You might have 80 or 90% of your content production and your teams being able to use Blackbird to finish and deliver back into Flow and distribute. But for those craft workflows, you can still use Blackbird and you can still have Flow managing the media access and the projects in the background as well. So it's a really important point.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think, this is really where we see a load of value, because we've done some great integrations with some of those tool chains. In fact, only this week, last week, we announced our integration with Resolve, which is a great color grading application that someone might want to be using for content they've generated in Blackbird. So they can do all their edit using remote browser access to it, and then somebody can launch that same content up inside of Resolve, bring it in from our new workflow integration, and off they go. They can color grade it. So we're really trying to reduce the friction in those workflows, as you say, to enable people to have that flexibility. So last one I really want to talk about, and then I think we'll get to Dan to see, because I see we've got quite a lot of excellent Q&A coming in, so keep those coming. It is really just to talk a little bit about Flow Story versus Blackbird. So, we have our own editing platform, which is called Flow Story, and it provides you with some of the media asset management things, but it also does have a timeline editor, but it's a downloadable application. It's one that you would install on your desktop application. And from my perspective, and I think we were talking about this earlier, it really is about what workflow do you need, right? What workflow do you want? Does Flow Story really compete with Blackbird? We don't think so at all, right? Blackbird enables a completely unique workflow that you aren't going to get from a Flow Story interface. And some of the things that you showed us, in terms of being able to switch between almost an NLE experience right down to a very simplistic experience, all within that same web-based view. I wondered if you had any sort of thoughts on this one as well.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a similar conversation in the way to talking about craft edit and grading workflows. There is always a place for multiple tools within a workflow and using the right tool for the job. I would say what we're seeing in the big difference, as you said here, is what Blackbird offers as a cloud native tool is scalability, and that's a really important thing. It doesn't really matter what the function is. If you are using an installed application, then you by definition have infrastructure attached to the user side of the workflow. So whether it's whether you're virtualizing something somewhere or whether you're downloading and installing on a local machine, every single user needs connectivity, media, hardware potentially, or a virtual machine, and so on. So that's great if that's the function you need. But obviously that's where we come in as something different with the ability to do what we do in a browser. So it's having remote working, totally scalable, zero infrastructure overhead scalability around the user side of things for us that really opens up those options. So yeah, there's room for everything, and everything has its place for sure, definitely.
Fantastic. So Dan, we've got a lot of questions coming in. Hopefully you've been monitoring them for us. I wondered if you wanted to sort of bring us some of the ones that have been voted for, and we can answer them in real time. And if people haven't, we don't cover them right now in this real time thing, we will definitely answer all the questions. So Dan, do you want to see if there's a few that you want to grab for us?
Absolutely. So just while we're on the topic of Flow Story, the question is, projects from Blackbird can be opened in Flow Story and vice versa. How would that integrate into the workflow?
Yeah, so as it stands, if you wanted to take the finished material that we saw now and then kind of load it in Flow Story and do something else inside of Flow Story, you certainly could do that. The next level of integration would be to ingest that EDL that Ollie mentioned, so the EDL can come back as well, so we can then use that and then load that into Flow Story, or you could load it into Adobe Premiere or into any of the other kind of tools. So that would enable that part of the workflow if you wanted to do, further additional craft editing on top.
Great. A big question up at the top of the list: how is Blackbird licensed? Is it a subscription?
Yes, it is. So we normally operate on an annual licensing model, and essentially to keep it simple, there's two things that we license on. One is the number of users, that's easy. And the second is that Blackbird Edge engine that's handling the ingest and the publish side of things. Now, just to be very clear there, we give our customers enough capacity to handle their media. So in a live environment, the valid question would be, how many concurrent live stream ingests do you need? But because that's running on customer infrastructure or partner infrastructure, one of the key things for us is that it enables us to be fixed price. So we are a subscription model, but you license, the workflow, and that's it. Blackbird doesn't license per gig per minute. There's no egress charges from our cloud. Yeah, it's a very clean and fixed price proposition, which is often refreshing in the world of cloud, I think, for a lot of people.
Awesome. Can you give us an idea of sort of the hardware requirements needed at site? So the question is specific to where the EFS is located, but maybe even what sort of laptop requirements, if there's any, to run the client.
So that Blackbird Edge that's handling our ingest and publish is just a software application. So you can run it on a piece of hardware. It's fairly standard hardware. The only real reason to do that is if you want to use baseband SDI as a live input, because obviously you need a physical I/O board for that. For most of our customers, Blackbird Edge is going to run virtualized on a virtual machine that's sat alongside the EFS on that network, or indeed as a virtual machine up inside any cloud infrastructure as well. So yeah, it's a pretty easy thing to deploy. It's just a piece of software essentially that's going to watch storage. Obviously, it does a lot more clever stuff in the background, but in terms of how you're installing it, it's pretty straightforward.
Great. And then how about like client laptop or desktop requirements? We know those are light, but are there any minimum requirements?
Not really. It's a dangerous thing to say. So I think certainly we have a lot of customers running on reasonably old laptops. You're on something that's within 3 or 4 years old and maybe has an i5 on it, then you're fine. There's no actual requirements. We don't use GPU. It's 100% native in the browser. But obviously, the more power that the more power your browser has available, the better the experience. But no, it's certainly no requirements that are worth flagging in most situations.
Awesome. Next one is the EditShare integration plugin included with the Blackbird subscription, or is there a separate option cost for that?
Yeah, so from our perspective, there's no additional cost, as Ollie mentioned. You would bring one of these edge servers, so they just provide a virtual machine or something that you put alongside your server. If you're in a cloud, EFS-V system, then you would we would power up a virtual machine in that environment, or it would be on-prem. But there's no additional cost from an EditShare side of things. And as Ollie mentioned, I think he talked about the subscription prices and the prices around the edge server itself.
Yeah, so if you have both solutions, there's no additional license cost from Blackbird either. If I'm being brutally realistic, then we're likely to have a conversation around configuration. and things like that, just to make sure we can get the workflow set up. But certainly there's no licensing option to allow you to integrate into the EditShare system.
And we're working very, very closely on, from a professional services point of view, so that, we can help tailor out those solutions so that people can build up a workflow, maybe in flow automation, that's really going to organize their material and make it work really, really smoothly with Blackbird, so there's no, issues with a mix of frame rates or something else. So we've got, people on both sides of the organization that can go in and work with the customer and make a really nice workflow that's going to work for the media they're working with as well. So there's, those are things that we can offer on top of that experience.
Great. Okay, we have a big question, a couple multi-part here. So can AAFs be round-tripped into other broadcast standard NLEs in both directions? For example, a sequence from Avid brought back into Blackbird or Flow, and then changes made and comments and markers added, and then sent back to the NLE for final output. Well, we'll get that one first, and then we'll come back to the second question.
Yeah, so Stephen can interrupt me if he wants to, but I'm going to say in theory, yes, you can. So Blackbird can take in AAFs. Actually, we do this quite a lot in predominantly actually, Avid workflows where we're bringing in AAFs that have sync information. Blackbird actually supports up to 18 cam synced multicam group management within the timeline as well, something we didn't touch on in the demo. So we can bring that information into the timeline. Certainly we can export back out as an AAF or as another EDL. So the workflow is possible, but obviously what there is in the background of that conversation is making sure that the EDLs line up and making sure that the media relinking and the media management in the background is lined up. But I think it's safe to say that it's technically perfectly feasible. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as those AF files end up on EFS, so you're saving them, you're not saving them locally on your machine, you actually make them available to EFS. That's more stuff that we can check in as we make it available to the Blackbird system. And then, on the back end, again, the rendered EDLs can be put back onto EFS, and then you can load those up back into, an Avid NLE or into, other tools that read AAFs, or if you want to use something else as well.
Awesome. And then are there any limitations to the size of those sequences in that scenario?
Not from us. No.
Very good.
Great. Up to 18 ganged recordings, I guess, but that's not really a size limitation. But
yeah, I say that we can have a synced multicam group of 18 cameras. I don't think I've ever seen anyone try and manage that. See a lot of groups of 4. But yeah, it is technically possible. Yeah.
Awesome. A question. I think this will be a quick one, Stephen. Does EditShare work with Premiere and After Effects?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, we have a full panel integration in there. You can get it from the Adobe Exchange. You can install it and then just point it at your EditShare system and off you go. So it's available there. We also have a similar workflow integration with DaVinci Resolve, which we've just announced. That will come in the 2021.1 release that released in December.
Is there a panel for Blackbird to browse the flow content?
There is not currently a panel for you to browse the database, as it were, and request content from Blackbird end. Obviously, anything I'm browsing in Blackbird has been made available to me from Flow's content anyway. So in one way, we are, one is mirroring the other, but certainly the way that the integration is built today is that the media asset management and the availability management is a Flow workflow function rather than a Blackbird function.
Absolutely, and both systems have APIs to allow you to bring metadata and exchange metadata. And so as we move forward with this with customers, we can also bring additional stuff. So there's certain particular types of metadata that you might have created in the world of Flow, or you might have created some data in Blackbird. I mean, you didn't really show us a lot of the powerful marker and subtitling and various other things that you can bring into the world of Blackbird. Again, those can be exchanged via that API to API integration. So there's plenty more things that we can do as customers want it. And I think, because we both embrace that sort of open API philosophy, those types of integrations are very, very straightforward. In fact, this whole integration has been very, very straightforward because of that philosophy from both companies.
For sure.
Excellent.
Great.
We have about 5 minutes left, so we'll take another few questions here. Can the media be stored in a cloud service like AWS?
Yes, it definitely can. In fact, the system that I was just demonstrating did happen to be in AWS because I don't have an EFS behind me. I've just got the orange shoes. But that's definitely the case. And in fact, you can have media that is in EFS itself, and we can make it available to the edge. But also, we find a lot of customers using Amazon Web Services and other cloud tools as an archive destination. So they might have had material that they were using in the Flow environment. They've archived it to S3 through our integration, or with some of the other different object stores. That archive destination, those S3 buckets, also can be directly made available into the Blackbird environment. So there's a very nice workflow there that is available. So you don't have to sort of restore it out of that S3 bucket back into EFS to bring it into the edge. The edge server can actually directly talk to S3 and make that content available. So there's some really nice, powerful workflows if you are in a cloud environment. Anything you wanted to add to that, Ollie?
No, you've done my job for me.
Brilliant.
Wonderful. How about final export? What resolution can that be at? Is this just for digital content or for full broadcast quality?
Yeah, so it can be for both. Obviously, the predominant output format resolution for us is 1080 in a variety of frame rates. Anything up to 60 frames a second is supported for us in terms of the input and output, but actually in the Blackbird codec itself as well. But we have done workflows with 4K files coming in and out of the system, and we also do publish in non-standard resolutions as well. So we can automatically publish in square, portrait, aspect ratios, and things like that too.
Awesome. I want to answer a question that I think you partially answered around internet connectivity requirements. What are the minimums, and what would be a good recommendation in terms of connectivity requirements?
Sure. So from the Blackbird end, essentially, as we kind of saw in the demo, when you're moving through content, we're just fetching the frames you need. So it is by definition very efficient because we're not trying to download or stream an entire piece of content to you. That being said, if I were working on a live stream and I wanted to sit and watch it in real time and edit on that, that's where the minimum of a 2 meg internet connection comes in. Now, obviously, if you've got more, you're probably going to get an improving experience, and certainly if you have multiple streams that you're trying to look at, or multiple stereo audio pairs within a stream, you're probably going to require a little bit more. But in essence, as you know, most remote connection systems might ask 20 or even 30 to 50 meg. So we're starting at 2 is pretty efficient. But certainly anything up from there is great. Which means that anyone who's on any even reasonably low-end home-based broadband connection would be suitable as well.
Awesome. Stephen, you just shared a slide.
I did. I just wanted to make sure that people. So thanks there's been loads of questions, and it's really great to see the engagement. We'll definitely get through all of these questions after the event as well. So really appreciate that. Dan has just put into the chat link the link that we have on screen. So if you really want to find out more about how you can be using this combined solution between EditShare and Blackbird, go to editshare.com/blackbird-form. The link is also in the chat window, and you also get this link afterwards when we send out the recordings in case you want to come and watch it again. But of course, you can also get in touch with your Blackbird or EditShare rep, and we're ready to engage our customers and talk more about the new workflows that we can enable through this joint solution.
Awesome. So I think that's probably the time that we have for today. We're right at the top of the hour here. So first of all, thank you so much to Oliver and Stephen for getting us up to speed on rapid editing in the cloud. And thanks to all of you for all your questions, for your continued participation. This is why we do these webinar sessions. Thank you. This has been fantastic. So I think I just have to say thank you one more time. We appreciate your interest, and we'll see you next time. And Oliver, Stephen, thank you again.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye now.